Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Archana, homeschooling mom of two boys. And in today's video, I want to do a detailed review and flip through of the science curriculum that I'm using with my third grader. So the science curriculum that I'm using is called the Elemental Science. It is by the Elemental Science Publishing Company. If you Google them, I'm sure you will be redirected to their site. So I'm reviewing the physics in this video. And the physics curriculum comes with the teacher guide and the student workbook. There are also lap booking templates available in the website that you can purchase separately. And it is very highly recommended by the Well-Trained Mind, which is actually a book written by the famous Susan Weisbauer, but it's also a small family-run publishing company that sells materials, related to classical education. This book is by Paige Hudson. And the three recommended textbooks for this curriculum are the Usborne Science Encyclopedia, this little physics primer by the Basher Science, and a book of physics experiments. And each lesson has a physics experiment that you conduct with your child. And this book is called Physics for Every Kid by author Janice Van Cleve. So before I do a detailed flip through of the book, I just wanted to give you a few details about the grammar stage. So I mentioned at the beginning of the video that this was a curricula for my third grader son. So for those of you who are not aware of the classical system of education, they divide the child's educational journey into three different stages. The elementary years are called the grammar stage, which basically span between second grade to fifth grade. And then the kid moves on to the middle school years, which is called the logic stage, and finally the rhetoric stage, which are the high school years. So this particular curricula is designed for kids between second and fifth grade. So hopefully I plan to use this curricula with my son until he's about, fourth or fifth grade, because it's the grammar stage curricula. Okay, so I'm opening the book, and here we have the publishing company information. It's called the Elemental Science Company, and this is the detailed table of contents. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can actually see the different chapters in each unit. So this particular curriculum is designed to be a 36-week curriculum, but for us it's taken a far longer time to explore the additional reading material and to conduct the different experiments which are listed in each chapter. The thing is, as you can see from the table of contents, kids are introduced to a lot of concepts very early on. These very same concepts are reintroduced in the middle school years and in the high school years in a much more detailed fashion. So as you can see, in the forces unit, kids get to learn about balance and gravity and friction. And each of these lessons are again reinforced with really great reading materials and videos. And finally, little experiments that you conduct at home, easy experiments that you can conduct at home with your kid to basically seal in the concepts. So this curricula relies on basically three different aspects. One is the student workbook. The other one is learning the concepts from the encyclopedia. And finally, the scientific demonstrations or the experiments that you conduct from Janice Van Cleve's experiment book. The one thing I liked about this curriculum is that the workbooks are very non-traditional and open-ended. All the kids have to do is just write down their narrations in the notebooks. So, memorization is encouraged in this curriculum, and each chapter comes with a few details in the form of a poem that your kid can memorize. There's also a few details about possible schedules that might work for you, and then quizzes. Now, each chapter at the end of every unit, there is a quiz that you can take in order to review the chapter. This is from the student workbook. I'm just showing you an example. So, that is a possible quiz for review. And then there are details about helpful articles that if you visit the website, you can find out more on. Now, I've already showed you the list of books that you need for this curriculum. The Usborne Science Encyclopedia is the primary text, along with this Basher Science primer called Physics, Why Matter Matters. And finally, for the engineering unit, there is another little book by the Basher Science Company, which I'm going to show you in a second. So, this is the Basher Science book on engineering that you will be using for specifically for the engineering unit. And then there are additional books which are listed by week. Sometimes we have succeeded in procuring it from the library, and sometimes, we just pass it by. But this list is pretty detailed. There's also a page on the supplies that you need if you are planning to do the experiments, and this is extremely useful because it helps you to get prepared and planned. So this is how the whole thing is laid out according to unit. So the first unit is the energy unit, and this page gives you a basic overview of how it would flow if you were to follow this schedule. So each week you study a different chapter, and there's the poem that your kid needs to memorize, and there is the list of vocabulary words, which is very important, and of course the supplies that you need for your experiments. So here's a little overview of how a possible lesson would flow. First, you would conduct the experiment with your child. So, the first chapter in energy teaches potential and kinetic energy. So, we conducted a very simple experiment called bonk, and very simple materials that were required, just some balls, a ruler, and a book. Now, after that, my kid basically, wrote down his narration in the very open ended student notebook. As far as I can remember, this particular chapter, he just copied down the concepts. And at the opposite page, you can see a lab report where the kid can basically write down the outcome of his experiment. So, under these really good subheads, our tools, our method, our outcome, and our insight, we choose to do it in a separate notebook. Now, as I mentioned before, the main text that you use for this particular curriculum is the Usborne Science Encyclopedia, and I'll just show you, the material that is required reading for this chapter. So this is basically the spread. It's basically a two-page, very colorful spread for every lesson. And after we read all the material, we watched a video on this QR code, and that was pretty much it. Very simple material to read, a simple experiment, and very open-ended notebooking. Now, I'm going to zoom in a little bit to show you the kind of discussion questions that you would work on at the end of every chapter. So, pretty basic. And there is an optional lap book. At first, I thought it was unnecessary, but these lap books are great for review. And again, there's a multi week project that's suggested that you could do with your child, coloring pages, and a weekly quiz. And there are possible schedules that are advised if you want to work on this curriculum 2 days a week or 5 days a week. There are things that are listed, tasks that you can complete with your child all week long. So now that you've seen the flow of a possible lesson, I'll just do a quick flip through just to show you the other material that's covered in this unit. So the second chapter is wind energy. And just like I mentioned, you would conduct your experiments, you would do your necessary reading, and then tackle the discussion questions. So the next chapter under energy is nuclear energy. Again, kids learn about nuclear fusion, nuclear fission, very simple experiments, read the necessary materials, and tackle the discussion questions. Um, there you have the vocabulary that you need to memorize for the chapter. Now, the memorization bit of it is actually mentioned in the student workbook. And every chapter has a very interesting little poem that your kid can memorize. And in this way, the facts, are embedded in the kid's memory. So, again, very, very simple poem, Law of Conservation of Energy. I think it's really useful. And then week 4, there is heat energy. Again, a very interesting lesson. And we did a couple of experiments, very simple experiments, and it was really, really interesting. And after heat, we moved on to heat transfer, how heat is transferred from, hot object to a cold object. And one of my videos actually has us doing this experiment. I'll link it down below. Now, after energy, we moved on to light, and this is the basic overview page, which tells you the materials you need, the time that it will take to complete this whole unit, your whole scope and sequence of this particular unit, and additional materials, and also the vocabulary words. So, under light, first lesson was Basically, just, introduction to light. Very simple experiment, which worked out really well. I mean, if I were to fault this curriculum, it would just be the parental involvement. I don't think any of these experiments can be conducted independently, and parental involvement and planning is a must. So, week three, light behavior lesson is introduced. Again, concepts like reflection and refraction are introduced, and a whole slew of really nice experiments that you can conduct at home. After that, it is a quick lesson about lenses and mirrors. And finally, to close out the unit, there is a very interesting scientist study, and the recommended scientist is Thomas Edison. So you would read the recommended biography book and then do a book report on the scientist. So if you can't find books on Thomas Edison, you could also choose from Isaac Newton, Albert Einstein, Niels Bohr, and a few others. So the next unit is the sound unit, and this is the basic overview page, again with the memory work that's required for the unit, a detailed list of the vocabulary words, and the supplies needed. So the first lesson under sound is basically, again, sound definition and the basic concept of sound. And here is the experiment, the details about the experiment, the discussion questions, and there is a multi-week project or activity. These multi-week projects and activities are really great for your homeschool portfolio. So from here on out, I'll just do a very quick flip through because this is how much we've covered with my son. So I actually don't have first-hand experience. So week 3 is wave behavior. Week 4, musical instruments. And that finishes out the sound unit and we begin the electricity unit. This is the basic overview page and it's very simple, battery connecting to a light source and then the memory work for the unit vocabulary, and of course a list of supplies. So week 2, circuits and batteries. Week 3, magnets. Week 4, electronics. Week 5, computers and coding. And that about rounds out the unit. So the next unit is forces. And under forces, first is just basic concept. Week 2 is balance. Week 3 is gravity. Week 4, friction. And week 5, floating. So after this, we move on to another unit on motion, again 4-week, scope and sequence. And that's the vocabulary, unit vocabulary. So week 1, dynamics. Week 2, motion. Week 3, circular motion, along with a very interesting experiment to make a helicopter. Week 4, scientist study on Isaac Newton. So after this is the engineering unit. This is the overview page with the scope and sequence. For this, we will be using Basher Science Engineering, a little book which basically explains concepts in a very easy manner. Week 1, ramps, levers, and screws. Week 2, wheels, gears, and pulleys. Week 3, turbines, pumps, and hydraulics. Week 4, engineering design. Week 5, materials. Week 6, bridges, arches. Week 7, modern machines. And week 8, digital machines. So that about rounds out the entire curriculum. This is the appendix page, which has few concepts explained out. Balance, Christopher Columbus and balance, and what the engineering design process is. And of course, a very comprehensive glossary, which basically, you can recap all the concepts that you've learned. So I hope you found this review useful. And as I already said, I'm planning to use this curriculum for at least another year with my son. We're planning to take it slow. And I am pretty satisfied with all the concepts that are introduced at this level. Definitely for the kid who enjoys healthy bit of science, but the only disadvantage is that it requires a lot of planning, a lot of parental involvement. It's not necessarily an open and go curriculum. So other than that, other than these few caveats, I think it's a wonderful curriculum, and I've really been loving the fact that I can stretch it out over a couple of years and take my time with this curriculum. So I hope you found this review useful. If you did, please give me a thumbs up and consider subscribing. And I'll be back with another video really soon. Bye bye.